All right. Yeah, we were looking at ideologies, and we mentioned 3 different ideologies so far. Are you all ready to? Okay. We looked at militarism, cult of the offensive, and social Darwinism. And I told you that these 3 are extremely important because when they're all together in a country, when they're used by the government all together in a country, that's quite a recipe for war and quite a recipe for systemic problems. Because usually the thing about ideologies is that they spread. Okay, you can never keep ideologies to yourselves or limited to one country. They tend to spread. So as they spread, they're going to cause trouble. And so I was telling you that militarism is different than militarization. And so a state can militarize, spend more on its military and its military expenditures. But at the same time, that state does not have to necessarily implement the militarist ideology. If you have both militarization and militarist ideology at the same time, that was definitely a more problematic case for us. And we gave the example of North Korea, and we said that we see that the US is militarizing quite a lot. And for a long time, actually. Remember, 1994 was when Patrick Reagan carried out the research and on how US is militarizing. And in 2009, the video that I sent you last time also showed that US is still militarizing. But at the same time, in society level, you don't actually see a militarist ideology in the society and in the government. So if there was both, and I would argue that you kind of had both a few years ago in a more neocon dominated government in the US, we don't really see that per se in the US anymore. Well, we did mention Turkey. Right? What did we say about Turkey? Especially after 1980, we saw militarist ideology. We saw quite a militarist government, a series of governments that have been influenced by the military. And we also, at the same time, had constant militarization. There were different reasons for that. One reason for militarization was the Greece-Turkey rivalry throughout decades. Although there was no conflict, no war, since the establishment of the Republic, there has been times of tension between Greece and Turkey, which kind of justified why Turkey would constantly militarize. Another thing, I was thinking about this, and I realized that we never actually mentioned PKK terrorism. One other reason to justify the high militarization rates in Turkey is PKK terrorism, the struggle against PKK since 1984. So it's not only international rivalry or international conflict that's going to trigger militarization, but also internal, perceived internal threats. Okay, so the Turkish military has been perceiving several threats inside and outside the country. For that reason, Turkey had a huge defense budget. Now, when I say a huge defense budget, I mean it. Turkey is actually one of the largest NATO, has one of the largest NATO armies, and it also has one of the highest defense budgets in the world. So that means, you know, there's definitely perceptions of threats inside and outside. For that reason, militarization is on the rise. One thing that I want you to think about is, you know, so many countries militarize. So many countries militarize, but when a country like Iran militarizes, and Iran does militarize, it becomes a huge problem in the international system. So there is a systemic threat felt by, especially the Western world, by Iran's militarization. What might be the reasons for that? That is an interesting question. Okay, that's something that we're going to discuss next week and until the end of the semester, because it looks like what's going on with Iran seems to be one of the biggest problems in the world today. So I'm looking at what happened in the past in the international system. So I'm trying to apply the information I get from the international system in the past to international system today. Okay, so you should consider in the following weeks what problems we're experiencing today, more global problems we're experiencing today, and how we can explain them. Okay, so I know you just had your midterm, but I'm trying to direct you to your final exam because the final exam is about a month and a half from today. So I'm just trying to tell you that whatever you learn in the course will be applied to global current issues today. Okay? So it's going to be, what issues do we have? Iran is certainly one of the issues, and we will actually talk about others in the meantime. But I want to remind you that we have looked at the system, and we have mentioned political developments such as political participation, such as regime type in the system, how these things actually shaped the international system. We also, throughout the course, looked at the economic system as well. I told you how taxation and revenue extraction of states actually pushed states and the system in certain ways. So while we were talking about these, we focused on the state, and we actually focused on not only economic development, but also how military innovations changed throughout decades and centuries. And then we also looked at state building, survival of the nation state, what Spruit has talked about. Now today, and next week actually, I'm going to look into state building a little bit more, because we have come to the point where we need to talk about nationalism more, okay? As another ideology, like militarism and social Darwinism and the cult of the offensive, nationalism is an ideology, but on the contrary to the three that we have talked about, nationalism is not necessarily conflictual, okay? We can't argue that nationalism leads to conflict or nationalism leads to problems in the international system. But if we are talking about hyper-nationalism, that's a different story, okay? Hyper-nationalism, when we see hyper-nationalism in the world, such as the Yugoslavian conflicts and also the world wars and several other conflicts, hyper-nationalism as an ideology can be devastating, okay? But nationalism, that's what I'm going to talk about today. Nationalism is actually an ideology that led to state building, okay? It came as an ideology that was supposed to be useful for the international system, and especially for creating nation states. Now, so far, you've read on the state and how state evolved, how state as a political organization evolved. Did you actually notice that nation state is quite an artificial creation? We had what treaty that was really important in terms of sovereignty?
Westphalia.
Westphalia, okay? So we don't really talk about nation states much before Westphalia, but by Westphalia, we actually start talking about, okay, there will be separate state units and they're not going to interfere with each other's business, and they're not going to cause trouble with one another because they don't interfere in each other's business. Okay? So after Westphalia, as time goes by, we have the creation of this concept, the nation state. Well, actually, two things: nation and state, and the idea combines into nation state. Okay. So what we are going to do is we're going to look at the definition of nation, and then we're going to look at the definition of. We already looked at the definition of state, right? Remember Max Weber's definition of the state. So we're going to look at nation, and then nationalism, and we're going to talk a lot about loyalty. And then I'm going to give you Ernst Gellner's perspective on nationalism. And you are assigned for next week, you should be finishing Ernst Gellner's article in your reader. And he is one of the most well-known scholars that studies nationalism. And his perspective of nationalism is debated in the international relations and political science literatures. So there are many counter arguments on nationalism, but we will be focusing on Ernst Gellner for our course. Okay? And then, I'll show you how nationalism is a very natural process, according to Ernst Gellner. And then I'm going to show you when and how nationalism starts leading to problems, which means, hyper-nationalism starts leading to problems in the system. And then by problems, what I specifically mean is war, because I'm a conflict scholar, so I study conflict. So for me, a huge problem in the international system is definitely war and is conflict. Can be interstate conflict, can be civil conflict, but I'm interested in wars. When I say problems, you might actually consider other things as problems as well, such as food security, right? I mean, there are many other problems in the world other than conflict, such as economic crises, environment. These are also huge problems, but I'm going to be focusing on war as a problem in the international system. Okay, so this is kind of the outline for today and for next week. And next week, once I finish nationalism, I'm going to start talking about imperialism. Okay, so remember all throughout the semester, I kept mentioning nationalism at different times, but now I'm going to really get into it. And then, we kept mentioning why, some states are more powerful than others. Now I'm going to get into imperialism and focus on imperialism. And that will be pretty much it for this course. Okay? We're only scratching the surface with this course and with these topics. But these are interesting topics for everyone to continue reading on. Guys, what's a nation? Yeah.
It's a certain community of people.
Community of people. Are we a nation in this classroom?
No.
We are a community.
That shares common heritage and culture.
Okay. Okay.
And linguistic.
You have to share a common what?
Lecture.
Common lecture. We are sharing a common lecture. That's true. Language. So are you then arguing that the Swiss are not a nation? They don't share a language.
Religion, culture, language.
Okay, hold on. You said culture. So she said culture. Language might be something that you share. But let's take the example of several countries. The United States. What languages are spoken in the United States, Sumi? What? English, Spanish, Chinese, Korean, Indian. There are so many languages spoken in the United States. So language might or might not define the nation. Let me tell you something. In Korea, the language spoken is Korean, because the Korean people are a more homogeneous group compared to the Swiss. Or are you from Denmark as well?
Norway.
You're from Norway. You're from Denmark. Okay. I didn't know you were from Norway. Okay. In Denmark, would you argue that Danish is the language? Are there other languages that are spoken? Danish is the national language. There's nothing else?
Yeah, of course you can have guests, like I'm in Turkey, but I'm not.
Okay, how about minorities?
They learn Danish.
Okay, so the language is then, in the case of Denmark, an element that makes the Danish people a nation. So language might or might not be an element to actually define who is a nation, okay? In the case of Turkey, there's several languages spoken. There's Turkish, there's Kurdish, there's Arabic, there's Laz, right? Well, Lazish? I don't know how you would translate it. Okay, so there are several languages. So it's more difficult to actually define the nation with the language spoken in the country. When you have different backgrounds in the country, it's harder to define the nation with language. But there are definitely states where the nation have one common language, and we have just figured out that Denmark is one of those. How about Norway? You have Samis, right? Minority Samis. So do they speak a different language?
I guess they do, but they were forbidden for a long time, so I don't know how much they actually, how much of the language survived.
Okay, so maybe the language did not survive. Maybe it did. I'm not.
They speak a little bit, but at school you have to speak Norwegian. So
Okay.
They cannot speak their own language.
But the language is probably spoken in local settings. I mean, it is in Turkey as well. The official language in Turkey is Turkish, but I know for a fact that other languages are spoken in local settings, like between people and within the family and other local settings. So here then, language might be one of the things. What else? History. Actually, yes, history is kind of more binding in the sense that, you share a common history, meaning you have been living together for quite a while, okay? So nations, when the concept of nation state was created, and after its failure, it became, the norm in the international system. Remember, every other political unit has finally become, after the First World War, has become a nation state. So common history is one of the elements to see what group of people would make a nation. That's something that's missing between us. If you could take more courses with me in the future, but I mean, seriously, you will be here for about 4 years on average. And considering this is a third-year course, we don't have enough time to build that history. But if we were to build a history together, that would actually be one of the elements to make a community, a group of people into a nation. So the ideal thing is you have both a language and an ethnicity and history, common language, common ethnicity, common history, common race, common religion. All these characteristics of the group would ideally be the same in an ideal nation, okay? For that reason, I would argue, and a lot of scholars would argue, that nation is quite a superficial social creation. It's a social construction, okay? You create the idea of a nation once you have a group of people and you established a state. And then it becomes a nation state, Yes.
But does a nation have to be tied to a state? Can you not have a nation state and in that there be multiple nations?
Absolutely not. You might actually have a nation, but that nation may not have established a state.
Sure.
You know, the Kurds have been for centuries arguing that they're a nation, and they have not been able to establish a state. Palestine has been also in the same situation. The Northern Cyprus has been arguing that it is a nation and a state, while no one really recognizes that Northern Cyprus is a state, but they argue that they're a separate nation. So there are definitely cases where you have a nation, but not a state. But usually, if you have a state, if you have created a state, if you have established a state, you try to create a nation. So when you're not able to create a nation that identifies as a nation, okay, identifies with each other as a nation, then that state risks extinct. So that state it could actually collapse because the people are not identifying with that state per se. Yes.
What is today not artificial? The law, the state that ensures the law. One even could claim the religion is artificial. Everything is artificial because where humans...
Let's not say artificial, let's say socially constructed. Because artificial has this negative connotation, right? But if you say socially constructed, people actually, create these forms and structures. Absolutely. I mean, almost everything is created by people in that sense. So
preventing chaos.
here's the thing, though. If you have created, I'll keep giving the example of Denmark because Magnus is from Denmark.
And I'm sorry, it was wrong, because we have Greenland in there, they speak Inuit or
Okay, so I won't give the example of. Okay, how did you forget? All right, I'm not giving the example of Denmark anymore.
Iceland, they speak.
I can. Okay, Iceland is really small though.
Yeah, they used to
Okay.
be Danish 50 years ago, but
Okay, my co-author is from Iceland, so let's stop that.
they're very Icelandic and nothing else.
Okay, so let's give the example of Iceland, or I will give the example of Korea. Actually, one of the more homogeneous states. When you have a group of people that pretty much share all these common characteristics that make them a nation, then it's not artificial or socially constructed. Then you have a naturally constructed state and a nation. Okay? But it is extremely rare, guys, okay? In this world, most borders are pretty much formed with groups of people that are very different from one another. I think I have mentioned to you that Europe has had a long time to evolve. And I think I have told you that Europe has been fighting for a very long time, for centuries, until Westphalia. And you have some kind of homogenization. And here, homogenization is really a very politically correct, polite way of saying they killed each other for a long time. And then in the end, those who won have dominated those who lost. And in the end, homogenization is basically what you have left as a result of fighting for a long time, okay? So here's the interesting thing. Wars lead to homogenization. Homogenization in this context is a good thing, but I'm reminding you that homogenization actually means you're killing other ethnic groups that are different from you. You're fighting with them so that you become the victors, you become the winners. And as a result, you're homogenized. You're a nation now. Voila. Here's the thing, though. Again, let's go back and look at Europe. Is Europe homogeneous? Not at all. You have, in Britain, you have the Welsh, you have the Scots, you have the Irish, you have all these different people. So again, you know, after all the fighting and after all the evolution of these groups as a state, there's not one nation per se, okay? Look at France also. Look at other states. Well, actually, look at Germany. Germany has quite a huge Turkish population at this point. So would you consider Germany as a homogeneous state, a homogeneous nation anymore?
Actually, yes. No.
Actually, no.
There
No.
are even Turkish MPs.
Absolutely, and there are also, in France, there is a huge number of North African population coming from former colonies. So would you consider that country as a very homogeneous nation? Not really. So to tell you the truth, you don't really have that, okay? It's very rare that countries, states will have homogeneous nations in the world today. But like I said, haven't they tried? Sure. Homogenization was perceived as the condition of being a nation state. Okay? It was perceived as a good thing. Those who were signing the 2 treaties in Westphalia were actually thinking homogenization is a good thing. And nationalism is a good thing. Because nationalism brings together people from different backgrounds and tells them that you are one nation, and as one nation, you are creating this one nation state, and you're going to live in peace in this one nation state. It sounds nice, doesn't it?
Nuts.
A great story. If this was the end of the story, it would be a great story. But, you know, no one lived happily ever after. And the story is not that great afterwards. Yes.
When you're speaking about nationalism, I think you're referring to ethnicity, religion, culture, these kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
However, is politics also not a part of it now? For example, with states like the US, Australia, would it be correct to argue that there is no ethnic or religious actual framework to its nationalism, and it's only a political form of nationalism? So to be a US citizen, you can be from any ethnic background, any cultural, any race.
Citizenship is different than what we are talking about. Citizenship is a political act, okay? But the nationalism does have something to do with your background. And I am going to get to that. But what you are talking about is citizenship. In US politics, being a nation or different ethnicity or coming from a different religion, these are very important issues. And I think in Australian politics as well. Last week I had a colleague from Griffith University in Australia, and he was telling me that ethnicity and migration of different people coming from different places, especially in Asia, to Australia, has actually led to several debates about what the Australian nation is, or what the Australian state is doing. Is it, you know, is there racism, or is there... So all these debates are present in the US and in Australia, okay? Because citizenship in these multi-ethnic states is indeed a political decision, okay? But feeling as part of a nation is what we are really talking about. So we are really talking about, you will see, loyalties, okay? So I'm going to get a little bit into sociology here, okay? Because I'm going to talk about the society's loyalties. What actually people, societies are loyal to, and why they form these loyalties. So I'm kind of getting into political sociology in that sense, okay? Yeah?
I think that some people felt so much lonely and weak that they wanted some solidarity, then created the nation and nationalism.
Okay.
However, thinking from the perspective of the French Revolution, solidarity was needed in that time against the oppression of the state.
Okay. I would definitely agree that sometimes people feel lonely. Is there anyone who sometimes feel lonely?
Sometimes.
Okay, yes. I would also raise my hand. There are, you know, we sometimes feel that we don't belong. I don't know. You first came to Bilkent and you were 18 or 17 or 16. Okay. So you come to a new environment and it's huge. I mean, this is a huge university. It's one of the biggest universities, right? So you come to the university and you feel that everyone is quite different from one another. And you come from high school, and just when you started enjoying high school comes to an end, right? High school years come to an end. And you had to go through the exam and all that. And you're here. And for the exchange students, actually, we have 4 exchange students in class. And you must have thought, you know, you're coming to a country that you have never been to. And who knows what you heard about the country? Maybe you heard a lot of good things. Maybe you heard a lot of not so good things. So there was definitely a sense of
Alienation.
okay, yes, alienation, that's true. But also some sense of wanting to belong as soon as possible. I would guess that the exchange students and all the other students started going to social events. I don't know, to parties, to clubs, club meetings, and you try to actually meet with people because, you know, the most natural instinct that you have is to belong.
To blend in.
Okay? To blend in, absolutely. And here's the thing, no one really wants to be very different. Okay? Sometimes it's nice to be different, and there are some people who would actually think that, you know, a different hairstyle, a different makeup, or different clothes, or differences might actually get attention, and that attention you might like. But the general inclination will be that you will want to blend in, okay? And you will want to form a loyalty. Bilkent loyalty, or I don't know, probably for the exchange students, when you go back, you would like to say, hey, you know, it was a good experience. I hated it, okay. Hopefully you're not going to say that. But, you know, probably what you would want to say is, well, you know, I had fun time. It was nice. It was
Kebab
a different...
was nice.
Okay, kebab was nice. Come on, you identify Turkey with kebab. I would... What? Definitely you do. Okay. A Turkish delight. Okay, so that's nicer. Okay, I don't want to associate Turkey with kebab only. Kebab is nice. Okay, so the point is, you know, you want to lead your life in the most effective, efficient way possible. Is there anyone in this classroom who wants to be unhappy?
Who wants to be?
Who wants to be unhappy for the rest of your lives? So, you know, when I ask the question that way, it sounds weird. But this is pretty much what we are talking about. Everyone wants to lead a productive, happy life. It depends on, you know, everyone has different tastes and different hobbies, different things that they're happy with. But I think the common thing here in this classroom is we all want to be happy in our own ways. And being happy is an act very much related to your surroundings, okay? So if you have people that you hate around you, you're not going to be very happy, okay? Or if you do not feel belonging to your environment, to your surroundings, then you're not going to feel very happy. It's better for the exchange students because you're only here for 1 semester, right? But for the rest of the guys, if you are unhappy, you know, that if you don't feel belonging, that's actually worse because it's, you know, they're going to be here for longer. I I'm assuming everybody is extremely happy to be at Bilkent. So we are talking about here loyalty. And before coming to Bilkent, you were first loyal to your family. Okay? You are still firstly loyal to your family. Most probably, right? Hopefully, that is. So loyalty to your family will be followed by loyalty to your, I don't know, best friend? That's usually how it works for most people. And then, well, not yet. Hold on, you're too young for that. So after a while, okay, your loyalty will be directed at your spouse. You're not married, are you? No. Okay. And after that, you're going to have your own family. You'll establish your own family, and you are going to have loyalty to your own family. But at the same time, at that point, you have loyalty to your community. Who's your community? Bilkent community? Okay, you're not at Bilkent yet. Who's your community? Neighbors? Seriously, are neighbors your community?
No. Including
Neighborhood. Okay, not only neighbors, but neighborhood, Kıvanç says. Good. Okay, who else? So by community, who are we talking about? Who's the community? Yes.
Could also be like IR scholars of the world.
Okay, for me, absolutely.
I'm not IR scholar, but
all IR students.
Okay, for this is actually true, because in my case, I feel that I belong to IR scholars in the world in general, but conflict scholars especially, because that's what I do, right? So when I go to conferences, let me give you an example. Every year in April, sometimes in May or in the beginning of April, we have the International Studies Association. And throughout the year, we get emails and updates. There's a newsletter and all that. And there are elections. Also, there are officers and there are elections. So there's that community of international studies scholars. They're not only IR scholars. They're political scientists, political sociologists, political psychologists. So there are all sorts of different people, but they do international studies. So that means every year I go to that conference, and every year I feel like, I belong to that community of people. So that's something that I do for sure. But in that community, it's a huge community, okay? Seriously, it's really big. The conferences are really big. So I have a smaller inner group that do, conflict studies. I study ethnicity, minorities, religion, and conflict, right? So that's what I do for a living. So what I do then is I connect with people who also study the same stuff that I do. And here's the thing. Imagine you go to dinner and you actually talk about conflict and, minority conflict and which conflict was more terrible. So this is the kind of stuff, really nerdy stuff that we're talking about, right? Here's the thing though. What sounds really nerdy to someone outside the community sounds very fun to us. Like, I'm very happy to talk about, these things that will not sound that fun to other people. Okay? What does that mean? That means I have created and I have connected a loyalty to that community, and I have been, doing this for the last more than 10 years. That's, quite a while to actually connect to a community. And so you start feeling that you belong. If they said, you're never coming to our meetings anymore, I would actually be sad. It would definitely decrease my level of happiness. It would definitely create a conflictual situation for me. Okay? So that is related to, that is one of the communities that I belong to. I could belong to a knitting community as well. I don't know how to knit. But for the sake of the example, if I belong to a knitting community, that would be another community that I would have loyalties to. What communities do you have loyalties to?
My family, of course.
What?
My family.
Your family. Okay. After your family, though, we're talking about larger communities.
Football club.
So mine was the IR. Okay. I'm a Fenerbahçe fan.
I'm Galatasaray.
You are a Galatasaray fan. I hate you. Yeah. Okay. Actually, if you have loyalties to communities, you have strong feelings and you have strong loyalty. I didn't mean that I hate you, but I hate Galatasaray. So you have these loyalties to football, soccer clubs, and that also defines who you are to an extent. I mean, it might sound weird. Am I supposed to give a break?
In 5 minutes.
We have still 5 minutes.
Oh, we still have 5 minutes. Okay, there's noise coming from outside, so I thought, okay, good. So I can go back to Fenerbahçe. So this loyalty that I had has been growing since my childhood. And trust me, my father was not a fan of Fenerbahçe. My mom was not a fan of Fenerbahçe. And my brother wasn't either. So no one actually forced me to be a Fenerbahçe fan. For some reason, I developed that loyalty, and I decided that this is something that I really like. And then I started watching games. And then I started getting upset when my team lost, especially recently. So, okay, let's not talk about that. I will go forward with another community loyalty in a minute. So guys, I actually connect with other Fenerbahçe fans from Facebook, which is, unexpected, right? I don't know if you would expect that. But at the same time, it's something that is fun, that makes me happy. So I have loyalty to that group, okay? Anything else? Is there any university club that any one of you belongs to? Diplomacy club? Okay, that's a community.
What about political loyalty, like for
Okay,
your party?
if there's anyone that is a member of a political party here, that would also mean that you have loyalty to that political party. You become a member to that party, which means you are developing loyalty. Now, here's the thing. No one actually mentioned religion, but religion has been a huge loyalty for many centuries, for so many people, okay? You could be, a practicing Muslim, you could be a practicing Christian or a practicing Jewish or any other religion, which means that you have loyalties to the religion that you belong to. And loyalty is especially important in religion, okay, and in religious communities. So you have all these different loyalties to the family, to communities, to your religion, and you have, again, let's go back to ancient times. You have all these loyalties, and that's pretty much it for your life. You don't really have any loyalty to anything else. You are, what's that?
Chieftain?
What do you mean?
To the chieftain, to the king or to the state.
Okay, not yet. So at first, before the state is created, before the idea of state replaced other political units, such as city leagues and city-states and others, you have people that have local loyalties, okay? So you have these limited loyalties. So in my little world, as a Fenerbahçe fan, I am happy. So that's, if I live with the limited loyalty that I have, without actually being loyal to a higher authority, such as the state, that's pretty much it for a very long time, okay? For a very long time, we don't actually talk about loyalty to the state. It will come later. There will be a shift and loyalties of people in the world. And that is going to be different at different times at different countries. In the US, it will be different at a different time than in Europe. And in Turkey, it will be at a different time. And in the Middle East or Far East, it will be at different times. But sooner or later, you have a shift or a development of your loyalties from local loyalties to greater loyalties. And that greater loyalty is the loyalty to the nation state, okay? And there are certain reasons for that. Let's take a break and I'll get back to this.